There are those that don't know, and there are those that don't know they don't know. Welcome to Lesson Alpha. So welcome to Lesson 1. At the start of every lesson, I want to give you an understanding of the lesson in its entirety, which is what you will experience. Through this experience, you will develop a specific understanding. If you don't fully understand the lesson, there are risks to which you'll be exposed. But if you fully engage in the experience, it will unlock tremendous opportunity for growth. That is what this slide is. Now, at the start of every lesson, like this lesson, I'm going to try and give you an overview of what to expect and ultimately, what will happen in the instance that you don't fully engage with the experience, you don't fully adopt the understanding. So, with this lesson 1, which is all about the trader's timeline, okay, you are going to experience what the required timeline is. I'm going to give you a very good understanding of a trader's timeline, of what it takes and what's expected. Now, if you do fully understand the experience, okay, you'll be able to manage your expectations far better, but more importantly, you'll have a very important shift in your mindset. Now, sometimes we don't always learn these lessons, and remember that's what this entire course is about. It's 24 lessons. So there are lessons you're not going to fully adopt, and that's okay. It's important to be aware of what are the repercussions of that. Now, it does mean if you don't fully adopt this trader's timeline, that it is going to be a potentially stressful, painful journey. And for some traders, unfortunately, it does mean that you potentially quit at the wrong time. Okay. However, my hope is that all of you do adopt this understanding, and as a result, you'll have a tremendous amount more patience, but more importantly, you'll be extremely motivated. Okay, and as I go through this lesson, you're going to start to understand why, why it unlocks these things. Why potentially the consequences are there, and ultimately what you can do about it. Okay, let's get into it now. What we're going to start off with here, I'm actually going to take you through my timeline. Now, the reason is it's quite fitting. I'm on the verge of hitting my 10 years as a proprietary trader or trading within the financial markets. So you are going to get a very good sort of first-hand experience of what the 10 years look like. Now, what I've got here for you is my personal timeline, and I wanted to share this with you for 2 reasons. Okay, a lot of you traders are going to be able to relate, and that's important. I am no different from any of you, and likewise, you're no different from me. So a lot of these lessons, you can take something from it, and you can recognize yourself within those lessons. Okay, more importantly, you are going to see, what some of the dips look like, what some of the highs look like, okay? And that'll make you start to realize that it is normal to have the dips. It's normal to have the blowouts. It's normal to have the crazy moments in your career. The point is, if you can see it through and get to the required, parts of the timeline, ultimately you'll come out on top. Okay, so let's go through my timeline. Now, we're going to start off in year 1, all right, 2011. That's when my, career started. I was a brand new recruit. The very first lesson I learned, okay, it was about Facebook. It was lunchtime, I was on Facebook, and the mentor walked past. This was in my first week, by the way. The mentor walked past, and he said, tapped me on the shoulder, he said, "Excuse me, follow me." And I got up, obviously nervous as hell, went into a room, and he said to me straight, he looked me in the eyes and said to me, "How will Facebook benefit your career?" Okay, and that was the start of my career. That was the start of my understanding of, how important it is to do the right things with regards to trading and not waste time on things like Facebook. Okay, then about 2-3 months later, I had an incident where my alarm didn't go off. The same mentor, I got into the office 8:30. We were expected to be there for 6:30. Got into the office at 8:30. Step into my office, and I got sent home. Okay, I got told, pack up your stuff, go home. And obviously I objected. I was like, it's not my fault. And my mentor's message was very straightforward. If you don't have 2 alarms, it means you don't have the desire necessary to make it as a trader. Go home and think about this. And he sent me home, and obviously, natural instinct, I was a little bit upset, but there was a massive lesson to take from that. Okay? Then there was the cup of tea incident. This was a grad on our group. This wasn't me. It was the ECB Draghi's meeting. And at 12:45, obviously, the ECB releases the announcement. And at 12:40, this trader walked to his desk with a cup of tea. The head mentor then literally got up, went to his desk and said, "You, pack up your shit and get out." No questions asked, no reason, just a simple message. If you walking and getting tea 5 minutes before a massive central bank, okay, then you're not prepared, you're not focusing on the right things as a trader. Again, a valuable lesson for me to learn at someone else's expense, okay? And then the ECB Draghi rate cut. That same day, Mario Draghi, it was his first central bank meeting, he actually cut interest rates. Okay, now why that was important was, as traders, we had never seen volatility. This was pretty much my second month of trading. We had never seen, volatility in the markets. And that day, there was extreme volatility. I even remember our mentor had us with a very basic trade strategy, which was, if they cut rates, you simply buy the bonds. If they don't cut rates, you sell the bonds. And all of us that day ended up buying bonds. We made money, and we started to understand that, some of the important lessons to take from the market. So that was just some of the highlights of my first year. Now, I've underlined some key aspects on the slide, and you can see that. And the reason I've done that is that these were key lessons in my career. I didn't understand them then. I understand them now. But it's important for you to be able to relate. How often do you get up from your desk, or you're not at your desk, 15, 20 minutes before key announcements, whether it's economic data, central banks? Okay, how often are you spending time on Twitter and Facebook and all this social media that adds no value to your decision-making process? Okay, so these are the lessons that I want you to take at my expense. Okay, I learned these lessons, and you're going to learn these lessons either through me or by yourself the hard way. Okay, so year 2, no more money. Okay, I ran out of money. I had no more money, and as a result, I went into debt. Okay, what that meant was I had to choose. Do I go and get a normal 9-to-5 job, being a master's graduate, or do I take on debt and keep pursuing this career? Now, this is something a lot of you are at that point that you're questioning. Okay, the reality is I first borrowed money from family. Once I'd exhausted all those options, I then went to a bank. And I did what was necessary to survive. Okay, and that's important because as traders, sometimes we think that this is a hurdle that we can't overcome. The reality is you can. Okay, there's always a way. Yes, it means making massive sacrifices, but at the end of the day, how badly do you want this? Okay. The reality of 2012 was I was extremely consistent. Okay, I learned the concept of consistency very early in my career, but I was a consistent one-lot trader. Okay, and there were lots of lessons that I only learned later on in my career of what being a consistent one-lot trader means. Now, the reality is if you're so used to trading one lot in futures, to jump to 2 lots is 100% increase in your risk. Okay, and that changes the entire psychological profile of trading, when you're so used to trading one lots. So the point being, and the lesson I took from this is, and I say this to any new trader, don't ever start with one lot. You've got no options with a one lot, and it's very, very difficult to move, which it took me, by the way. It took me 16 months to move away from trading one lots, but I was extremely consistent. I was extremely good at taking, ticks out of the market, taking 200-300 euros, pounds, whatever it was, out of the market every single day. Now, one of the key lessons was, and it's quite a personal lesson, was the flight home to South Africa in 2012. My parents pretty much begged me, said, look, come home. And I said to my mom and dad, I don't want to, because I don't feel I've earned the right to come home. I don't feel like I've, done what I needed to do, to be worthy of coming home. Anyways, the point being was that flight, I went home, reluctantly. I had to borrow more money, from my parents. But I stayed with my parents, and I had a barbecue the one night, and my dad said something to me, and it's something I'll pass on to you as hopefully it can provide you with an understanding and motivation. And my dad said to me, look, the reality is, have you done your best? Have you given your best? And I said to him, look, honestly, Dad, I work 12 hours a day. I'm consistent. I make money every day. it's just the costs are very, very high in trading. At that point, most traders don't know. For us on a proprietary trading floor, we were paying about £2,200 a month. So that was for your desk fee, for the computer hire, for the licenses, etc., etc. And then every single £1 we made of profit, we split that 50-50 with the firm. So it was really difficult. And I said this to my dad, it was really hard. I think I'm getting better, but I'm getting no money. Okay, the reality was the costs were sinking me. That year I was up 14,000 euros. So I'd made a gross profit of 14,000 euros in 2012, but the reality was I wasn't getting any money at the end of every month because my desk fees were substantially higher. So again, a lot of you can relate to that. What do you do in that situation? Most people give up, right? A stubborn part of me didn't want to give up. That's the reality. And my dad said to me, look, if you've given your best, there's only one more lesson you can learn. And he said to me, I want you to go back and give it one more go, just one more go. But make sure that you take a risk that is at someone else's expense and don't hold back. In other words, go all in is what he was saying. Just go all in. If you believe in it, go all in, try it. The worst case scenario, you walk away, you get another career. And that leads me to 2013. I rocked up in 2013, I think it was February, it was the Italian elections. And for some odd reason, I had 9 BTPs. Now remember, I'm still that same one lot trader, sometimes 2 lots now, same 1-2 lot trader, and I had 9 Italian BTPs. Now, if you don't know what the BTP is, it's an extremely volatile product. But the reality is, it was the open, and I sold all 9 on the open. Why? It was a hung election, as far as I recall. And the reality was the Italian BTPs started offering and white boxing lower on the open. In other words, there was a volatility interruption at the open and the market was due to open 2 or 3 points lower. Now remember, I sold and I was reflecting something like 16,000 euros on side. Okay, so I was showing an incredible balance. I mean, this balance would have put my account not just back to zero, but actually positive. It was the start of 2013. It was that all-in moment for me. The short end, what happened was the market white boxed again, so volatility stopped. I couldn't get out because it didn't even open, and it actually went a point or two offside. At some point I was printing an unrealized loss of 9,000 euros. So you can imagine, in a swing of a moment from glory to to the end of the world, eventually I think I managed to get out of the trade for 200 euros. It came all the way back. But that day, a lesson, sort of dawned upon me. And this is the next key lesson you've got to take. In this game, at some point, you have to take a risk. When the stars align, you've got to go for it. I'm not saying you go all in. I'm not saying you risk your entire account. What I'm saying is that there are going to be a few opportunities in your career where you have to take a little bit more risk because the reward's there. But also because what you'll find is as you start to build an account, things become easier. And I noticed that. That was my key takeaway from 2013. I suddenly started trading 3, 4, 5 lots. I suddenly started going after certain comments. And all of a sudden, my account was 25,000. Okay, that was our first split level. How it worked then was the company took the 25,000, they divided it in 2. You got 12.5, they got 12.5, and your account goes back to 0. That's how it worked, right? So you can imagine, 2013, I'm 18 months into my career now, and I've got £12,500 in my account. What does every person do when they get a bit of money, right? And that's where the whole champagne story comes in. That was the first time in my life I'd ever tasted champagne. Again, something maybe a lot of you can relate to. Now, it was an incredible taste, more because I felt like I'd earned it. Right? But then came the curse of the golf clubs. Now, there is a running joke amongst traders that when you do have a really good, period in your career, don't go out and spend too much money. Don't go out and flash it around. Don't change who you are. Why? Because the reality is the moment you start to change things, okay, what ends up happening is you change the routines. You change the winning formula that ultimately made you succeed. Right, so be very cautious. Now, we call it the curse of the golf clubs because, funnily enough, when you buy, you suddenly have this money, you buy a set of golf clubs, you're going to start playing golf, which means Maybe Friday afternoons you only work a half day. Maybe, you're not quite 100% focused like you were when you were making money. And it's that change that ultimately brings a bit of a deterioration in your performance. Okay. But 2013 was a great year because I became a mentor. All right. Now, this is something, again, and a massively important lesson, and it's probably one of the things that saved my career, was the company I work for said, look, we recognize that you're good at talking to the young guys. We recognize you understand principles and fundamentals of the markets well. How about we pay you £500 a month to talk to them? Now you can imagine, at the start of 2013, I had no money. I had loads of debt. And this was a lifeline. Okay, this was the lifeline I needed to pay my rent. No longer did I have to worry about rent because it was being paid for, on behalf of the company I worked for. So the lesson to take from that is, if you can get passive incomes, hold on to them dearly. Don't give up on your passive incomes because they take that stress of finance off of your shoulders. Okay, so 2014, the Bund can't go to zero. This was kind of the highlight of the year, which is I got stuck in this narrative bias that bond markets it's not possible they go to zero when there's positive growth and inflation. The reality is they did go to zero. Okay, the reality is they went negative in 2015. I also then, had to learn the lesson in 2014 of, when times get tough, we all get distracted. I started looking around for jobs, execution jobs, hedge fund jobs. The reality, what do you think happened to my performance? Well, of course it went downhill. Why? Because what I was doing was I was looking at my problems and thinking I can solve them by finding another job. Okay, trading doesn't work like that. When times get tough, that's when you've got to step up and work at your game. Right? The problem is traders only tend to recognize that they're weak, their game is weak when times are tough. The reality is you've got to be working at your game all the time. Now, obviously 2014 was a continuation of 2013, and I finally got my account up to £100,000. And again, I'm not afraid to share these numbers with you because I want you to relate. Right? I want you to get an understanding of the years it took me and the sacrifices it took me so that you can relate to my story. Right? Again, 100,000 this time around, obviously the split changes. The company took £40,000. Imagine that feeling. A company takes 40,000 of your 100,000. They keep it. You get 60,000. Not easy to accept, but that was the deal. That was the sacrifice we made for someone taking our risk. Okay, now nowadays, you get so many trading platforms where you get 100% of your profits. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, I'm a firm believer, and you'll see as we go through this course and we talk about stoicism and principle adoption and all these things, I'm a firm believer you are a byproduct of your environment or of your, what you do on a day-to-day basis. Now, because we were born as traders into not an impossible environment, but a very different, difficult environment, it forced us to be, sort of really, grind out the tough days. It forced us to find money where, sometimes it didn't even exist. It forced us to work 14, 15 hours a day sometimes so that we could make money when the opportunity was there. Okay, so recognize that. Recognize how different it is now from 2011. Nowadays, you get 100% split accounts. Nowadays, you can pretty much run a retail account for bare bones $200-300 a month. Compare that to the £2,000, to £2,500 we paid at the start of our career in 2011. Okay, 2015, probably the biggest lesson of my career. It was my blowout. Okay, everyone's had a blowout. My account was up to 200k. I was flying. I was on cloud nine. I couldn't do wrong. There was a day I distinctly remember. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. It was initial jobless claims. You all know that number. Thursday's 1:30. It came out like 6 times higher than expected. 6 times lower than expected. And the market went crazy. The Bund blipped down like 30 ticks. And all I did that day was I instinctively reacted. I just faded it. Okay, and I just clicked and I bought 30 lots. And I was instantly €3,000 up. Instantly. And I got out and I kind of smiled and I was like, best day ever, And I remember discussing this with one of the the big traders who a lot of you will know. He's still at Axia. And he said to me that day, you're just a fader and you got away with it. Now, in hindsight, did I do anything methodical? Did I do anything, strategic? No. Okay, I just reacted. I just clicked. And I got lucky. I got away with it. But the reality is, when you are on cloud nine, the markets will do that. Okay, you don't need to learn too many lessons when the times are good. But the end of 2015 was my blowout. Very simple. It was, I went to Cape Town. I was now making good money. I had a plan to set up a trading office in Cape Town. And I wanted, to kind of change things up, change the routine, get a team going there, live in paradise. Okay, you're making good money. Now you want to relax a little bit and live by the beach. The reality is I started getting into work 9 a.m. some days, 9:30 other days. I was going out partying the night before, so routine came sloppy. I rocked up to the office in flip-flops and shorts. And yes, in the beginning, in the first couple of days, things were good. Okay, I was still on a roll. I could do no wrong. Until one morning, Thursday, ECB December. Most people will remember this. Most of the traders at Axia will remember this as well. And it was a morning where we were 12:45, ECB decision. They were expected to cut rates. It was 100% price they would cut rates. And at 12:43, there was a rumor that hit the wires, reported by the Financial Times, that the ECB wasn't going to cut rates. Okay, and bang, bang. I clicked 40 lots in the euro-dollar FX. Straight away, $10,000, $11,000. Biggest update of my career. I could do no wrong. I mean, it was amazing. I was like, this is just too easy. 12:45, the wires reported, both Bloomberg and Reuters reported, ECB doesn't cut rates, keeps rates unchanged. I bought the same 40 lots. This time, however, the market's volatility stopped and they started auctioning. And whilst they were auctioning, in other words, the market was shut, it came out there was a correction. Both Bloomberg and Reuters reported a mistake and that the ECB had cut rates. Now, at this point, you can imagine the market's auctioning 2-3 points lower, 200 pips, 300 pips lower. And you can imagine I'm long 40 lots. Now, to put it into perspective, that day was my career worst day. To this day, 5 years, 6 years later, it's still my career worst day. And I just distinctly remember getting out as quickly as I could. I didn't know what to do. I was like a deer in the headlights. And I sat outside and I was numb. Okay, I was numb to the whole situation, and I'd pretty much just blown out 50-60% of my entire account. And the next few days I came in, same sort of thing. I came in whenever I felt like, and I just started losing 10,000 after 10,000 after 10,000. No routine, no preparation, just revenge trading. Okay, I didn't deserve what happened. Let's be honest. It wasn't my fault. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. It was unfair. And again, hopefully you can relate to this. It was unfair. How often we use that word? But the reality was, and it took me 2 months to recognize it, the reality was, just because something is 99% certain doesn't make it 100% certain. There's always a risk. That's the lesson. But more importantly, if you're a trader that's used to trading 4 or 5 lots, why are you suddenly trading 40 lots? And those were the key takeaways. And I can promise you it probably didn't take me 2 months. It probably took me a lot longer than that to fully accept what had happened. And the reality was the firm I was trading for stopped me out eventually. They said, look, we feel you're trying to sabotage your account. So, at this point you can imagine my ego is feeling extremely bruised. Hopefully you can all relate to that again. Because why? Why are you stopping me out? I still have a positive account. I'm entitled to trade. It's my money. I can do what I like. Right? The reality was that they were trying to protect me. I didn't see it, I didn't know it, and I didn't want to know it. Anyways, start of 2016, the brokerage went bankrupt. Okay, another lesson that, again, a lot of Axia traders will know about because they lost a lot of money in that bankruptcy. Now, it was the same year Axia was founded, 2016, and the next key lesson was the Brexit day. Okay, it was day one, was the first day of Axia trading, and it happened to be the Brexit announcement. And we all came in, we did a trade together that we'd been doing for years, and the short end of it is we got extremely, extremely lucky. And you're going to hear me using this word lucky a number of times over the course of this course. Why? Because trading is, yes, of course, it's hard work and lessons and principles and all this. But when you work hard and you develop the necessary skills, you get lucky every now and again. And it's important you recognize that luck is a part of the hard work. It's what you get for working hard. Now,